Hola, hola, amigas. Welcome to another episode of Modern Latina in Midlife. Today, I have a really fun guest joining us to talk about herbalism and ceremonies and, sun and moon energy. We're talking about healing with, the remedies that we learned from our ancestors. And it was a really, really fun interview, just bringing it all together. The guest today is Josie Castañeda Morales. She is a modern day curandera. At an early age, she was introduced to the practice of curanderismo as a way of life. Today, Josie serves her Miami community as a yerbera, one who works with herbs. She's the author of Latine Herbalism, where she shares remedios y rituales for personal self care and healing. Her sessions are rooted in the tradition of curanderismo, but address modern diseases of disconnection, closed heart, and grief. Often called a genuine healer, Josie walks you through the path of self discovery and self acceptance. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome Josie. Welcome to the podcast, Josie Castañeda Morales. I'm so glad that you're here. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Wonderful. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm super excited about the topic we're going to talk about today. It's something that's been coming up a lot, even in with the women in my coaching program, because I help them start businesses. So, they've been kind of delving into herbalism and flower essence.
Nice.
So this is all right up that alley. So I'm super excited for this conversation. So
Oh, beautiful.
but let's start with a brief, if you could just give us a brief story of you and just to get to know you a little bit more and what led you to what you do today.
Sure. Yeah, I get that question a lot, especially when I started my own business. People would say, How? How did you do this? How did you come up with this idea? I started my business, which is Curandera Remedies, which is a wellness business before wellness was an industry standard, which is now today. So this is probably 15 years ago. And so when I started, everybody wanted to know, how did you come up with this? And so I'm very versed in having to share the story, which I love. So I was born in Mexico. My mother is a Toltec indigenous Mexican woman. My father was a Cuban man. He came to Mexico, met my mother, fell in love. I was born there. And then when I was 7 years old, we came into the United States. My father, having had the opportunity to become a US citizen, being Cuban, he wanted to come back here and live here. So we moved to Miami when I was 7 years old. And, I was raised what I call a very linear life. You get, to think, you go to school, you get a good education, you get a good job, you get married, you have the children, you retire, and that's it. Life is done. It's very linear. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? And somewhere along the way, I made it what I call a spiral life, which is very, very different. And it's much more attuned to natural rhythm. So when I turned 17, I was still following the linear life. I went to New York City. I went to FIT, Fashion Institute of Technology. I studied to become a fashion designer. And I worked in the fashion industry for about 11 years. And so during those 11 years, what I did was sort of become conscious of the tremendous amount of disharmony that was in my life. And because of that, I started to dive into herbalism and into yoga and into meditation. My gateway to this was meditation 100%. I started meditating, and it's been now probably more than 25 years that I've meditated every single day, twice a day. That has never stopped in my life. But that is my number one. That is where I find all of my focus. That is where I actually get a chance to not only self-reflect, but also be inspired by whatever the universe wants to send my way. During that path, what I realized is that the herbalism that I was trying to study was something that I was actually born into. And when I made that connection, it's when it became very apparent, okay, this is what I want to do for the next part of my life. Today I can say what I want to do is empower others to empower themselves. But back then, all I could think about is, well, I want to help other people with herbalism, and other people are also reacting to me. They would see me. I worked in a corporate setting, which is not only is it very fast paced, it's also extremely self-deprecating, right? It's not actually about the person, it's about the company. And so you've got to give it all to the company, so I was still working, these crazy hours with these, intense deadlines, and people would say, wow, you look you're glowing. How can you be glowing when we're in the middle of this? Like, what's happening? What are you doing? I want what you have, and what is it? And so that's how I actually started making products for others, and then also slowly becoming more of an advocate of meditation. Um, and that's eventually, so I went from meditation to yoga to herbalism to back to curanderismo, which is the traditional folk healing of Mexico. So like that's kind of like how I did that circle.
Mhm.
And so that's pretty much it in a
Yeah.
nutshell.
Ooh, I love that. Oh, I'm already lit up. So I just like I feel like the tingles inside, like this is gonna be so much fun. I
I
love
love it.
it. So a couple questions came up. How did you make that connection that between like herbalism and that like this was something that you were born into? Like how did I know you kind of mentioned that, but I'm just curious.
Yeah, I was studying with a variety of different Western, what we call Western herbalists, which are from the United States or Western influence or European Western. Um, and they were talking about aloe vera. And I remember thinking, oh, wow. I remember having these aloe vera smoothies that my father used to make because we didn't go to the doctor. My parents were, I was a very kind of like a sickly toddler a little bit, but we were never really at the doctor all the time. My dad would make all these smoothies, all these drinks, all these things for me to eat and drink. But when the aloe vera came out, I remember thinking, oh, wow, that's right. We used to have this. Like I used to get this. And so little things, little by little, I realized, a lot of the stuff that we do is what we call preventative or food herbalism. It was part of the way that we were raised. And I
Mhm.
remember my mom, she used to make 3 meals, like cook every single meal every day, 3 meals a day. Like that to me is preventative herbalism, because you know exactly what you're getting in your food, the different herbs you're getting in your food. And so I realized, oh, wow, like I was kind of raised with this without really knowing I was raised with it. So yeah, that's when I made the connection.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, same, same, same.
Yeah.
My mom was always into the this and the plantas and the
hmm
the remedios and the smell this and apply this. So it was always that kind of stuff. And of course, we were always eating her homemade meals. So, wow, I love that. Okay, so let's get into, well, before we get into like what I really want to talk about, which is your book and all that fun stuff. I know one of the things that you value is talking about the importance of connecting with your heart. So can we talk about that a little bit?
Yes, totally. So I think one of the things that happens when we're thinking of life as linear, right? Beginning, middle, and end, is there's a disconnection of the connection of the heart to ourselves, right? We start doing things because there is goals to be had, right? And so when I look at a linear life, it's not just this particular platform, but it's also the goals are going in this direction, right? Whereas when we talk about a spiral life, the goal that you may hit the same exact goal, but because it's going in a spiral this way or this way, the goal may be the same, but it's in a different place in time and space, right? And so when I was pretty much attuned to being successfully financially, successfully with my health, successful with friends, when that's a when that's actually coming through, I think it's all about the other, right? In relationship with the other. And so that takes us outside of ourselves, our true self. And we start to sort of make breaking boundaries, like we start to break boundaries, we start to do things because other people feel like, well, you should be softer, you should be nicer, you should be, to fit and to make things mush, right? And to make things kind of get together. Whereas when you're really speaking from your heart, your true self comes out, and whoever shows up for that shows up for that. Right. There is no boundary break. There isn't, can you try to can you be nicer for this? Or can you be a little harder for this? There is none of that. It's really like what comes out of your heart comes out of your heart. And sometimes what comes out of your heart is anger. And sometimes what comes out of your heart is joy. And both of those are equally as important. And I think when we're talking about relating with others, sometimes we stop ourselves and we can be our true heartfelt self because we're trying to accommodate other people. So for me, connecting to our heart is really connecting to our inner knowing, our inner guide, and for women especially, our intuition. And there's no going back after that. When your
Mhm.
intuition is sharp and focused, everything you do, even when it feels wrong, is right. So that's
Mhm.
the importance of connecting to your heart, for me at least.
Yeah, I love that. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, that's the one thing that I work with my clients with is like tapping into your inner knowing,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to looking for your answers and your validation outside of you. Like go
That's
inside.
right.
So I love that. How do you guide people, or what would you suggest to people to like connect with their heart? Like, what would you tell people would be like the first steps for somebody who says like, how do I do this?
Find a great meditation or contemplation practice. You can only do that with yourself in silence. There's
Yeah.
a lot of people who would say, well, do this and do all these exercises. The doing gets in the way.
Yeah.
I've been guiding people one-on-one truly since I've been in Miami, so about 10 years now. And one of the things that I've learned that through that process is when your mind is distracted with any little thing, it's never the true you. And in order to find the true you, there has to be a moment of pause.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite places to learn, and I can maybe, suggest this, but one of the places that I learned a wonderful, not only practical, but powerful meditation and alternative meditation practice was with a place called the School of Practical Philosophy. They have an incredible first year where they're very specific about the quote unquote the practices they give you, but those practices pretty much lead up to contemplation and meditation. And one of the big things that they talk about is the pause. Literally, you pause before anything you even think or say or do. And it sounds a little weird because when you're really doing it, you kind of start to sound a little like a robot, and you start to look a little weird because you're like, before I pick up my pen, I gotta, and there's not thinking I'm gonna pick up a pen. It's just actually you pause and you pause and you pause. And that tiny little pause is a moment of opportunity, right? To understand, like, do I really need to pick up the pen, or is it something that I'm doing out of habit? And that's
Mm-hmm.
the part that really starts to shift for you. When meditation really works, you start to understand what's habitual, and you start to understand what's really and truly yours and who you really are. Because a lot of us are, we're programmed into a culture, and there's nothing wrong with that if you love the culture. But if your culture isn't, part of your value system or your internal value system, then it starts to clash. And so for me, I think meditation or any contemplation practice, like for us now I mean, at least, within the wellness industry, this whole thing with either cacao ceremonies or ayahuasca ceremonies or all these different ceremonies, that's what they're really for. They may be different lengths, right? And they may have different substances, but the reality is that that's what we're doing. We're taking a pause. We're stepping outside of the program system to sort of find out who we are. So that's where I say people should start. Find a meditation practice, find a contemplation practice, that yes, you can listen to and it brings your mind to a certain state. Then you have silence. And then listen to what comes up at that silence. That's really when the change happens in
Mm-hmm.
my humble opinion.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. It was interesting. I was on a car ride with my sister and my nephew over the weekend, and he was like, "Oh, I'm bored." I said, "Good.
Mm,
Be bored. Be bored. Allow
yeah.
yourself to be bored." And he's just like looked at me weird. I'm like, "You're gonna want this one day. Be bored."
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. All
Yeah.
right. So let's one of the things that I love to do with women is to help them follow their path, to listen to that nudge inside and embrace their curiosity and the love for their passion and for the things that light them up. Many times that means going against the grain, right? Of getting that college education and working in corporate or something that is, more acceptable by society today.
Right.
I'd like to dive into that a little bit more, into the beauty of following your own path. Can you speak
Yeah.
to that just a little bit more? I know we've already kind of started touching on that.
Yeah. So when I decided to, like, it became very apparent to me at one point that, oh, I can't do this corporate stuff again. Like, I knew there was something about, and it wasn't even about working with others, because I actually really enjoyed the last job that I had. I loved the team. I loved my boss. Everybody was wonderful, but I knew that it was time for me to step into something different. I personally, what I did was I said, okay, I'm going to start beginning certain day. I'm going to give myself 6 months. And from then on, that's it. I'm going to give my 2 months notice whenever the time comes, and I'm just going to go from there. But I also had a very, I don't want to say a safety net because that's not the correct word, but I felt safe because I had already been doing that part time for 5.5 years. So I was working a full time corporate job, and I was also working part time for myself. So I already knew what the grind was going to be like. physically for me in the way that I had set up my business. So when I made that decision, it was with that clarity. And a lot of people don't have that. So what I would recommend for others is if they can actually, having a pleasure project is a little bit different than moving out there into a quote unquote business, right? So if you have a pleasure project, no matter how you approach it, it's going to be fantastic. And maybe later on your pleasure project is going to become a business. Who knows? Like that's an unknown, right? But like if you really are working corporate and you're ready to move out of there and you're ready to have your own business and do more of that, then I say do it while you have the job. Because one of the things that I find, and personally I find heartbreaking, is for people to say, "Oh, I'm going to leave my job. I'm going to do this," and then 4 months later they're like, "This is horrible. I'm not making any money. I can't survive with this. I didn't know it's going to be like this." That to me breaks my heart. So it would be fantastic if people have a chance to test out what it is that they want to do for a little bit of a time. But if you find that you want to change your path into a different career or a different business or being, just a different place of where you are today, try to do that while you still have quote unquote a job, quote unquote that financial safety net. I think that's really important. And for me, that was something that I was able to do for 5.5 years. So it was sort of like the beta version, right? Like, let me do this and see if it works. And then I realized it works. And more importantly, the way that I set it up works where I'm also very happy because nothing breaks my heart more than to hear women and men say, I'm going to do this. I'm going to leave my job. I'm going to start. And, sometimes they're financially doing well, but they don't like what they're doing. They realize this is really not the part of the job that I like. Like, how do I get rid of this? How do I, or leaving a job that was for the most part financially successful to open up a business and then they're like, oh my god, I can't pay my rent. It's like nothing breaks my heart more than that. So I say, and I advocate for women and men to go out there and say, you know what, I'm going to try this. I'm going to double out. My family hopefully will support me and just I'm going to try for a year. I'm going to try for 6 months, in the role in the business that I want, because that way I know, and for me that was very helpful. And so because I already had that sort of like 5.5 year experience, I kind of knew what this could be, like if I was doing it full time. And so when I jumped from corporate to my own business, I had a very clear idea of where I was going. And so that made it very easy for me. But, I had this 5.5 years of experience. So that, that made it so much nicer. And even with that, like for example, the book, I didn't know I would write a book at some point. I really didn't. That's an unknown that's also very nice and happy. And it's part of the process of growing a business. And so, yeah, so I say to those people who really want to follow their own heart, once you have an idea, try to test it out, try to go out there and explore it as much as you can before you change your life. Because sometimes, ideas can be really beautiful, but then sometimes they're not really for us in that moment. So yeah, that's my advice.
Yeah, I love that. No, that's great. I think that's really sound advice, actually. Very, very good. Yeah. Great. Well, you've mentioned the book. Let's talk about it. One of the things that you mentioned in the book, I have it here in front of me. You talk about Latine, herbalism, and curanderismo. Let's start
Yeah,
there. What can you define what those are for our
yeah.
listeners?
So it's funny because when I was approached by the publisher, they're like, "Do you want to write a book about Latine herbalism and curanderismo?" And I was like, "Sure." And then they're like, "Well, let's do it in 4 months." I was like, "No, there's way too much to talk about. Like, we can't do that." But my initial reaction to that was like Latine herbalism. I'm like, "Oh, I don't know if I like that. Do I like the word Latine?" Like, I had a moment of self reflection. I'm like, do I really believe in that word? And then it was just I sat with it for, this is the way that I work. Like if there's something that I'm not sure of, I'll just sit with it and with the idea and with the thought for about a week and then see how I feel. I try not to have a reaction that pulls me a yay or a nay because I feel like that's not true, that comes from a habit. And so I sat with it and I was like, yeah, I feel okay with it. I wasn't in love with the word, but then I looked up and decided to make a little bit more of a research. And I felt like, you know what, for Latin Americans who are first and second generations here in the United States, it makes sense. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with that word. And then of course, curanderismo, I was always okay with. I was never a question mark. And those, who are listening, curanderismo is what people consider the folk tradition healing of Mexico and Latin America. But as I mentioned in the book, it's not 100% Mexican. it's got a lot of influences of a variety of different places. And so for me, you know, the word curanderismo, and when I was raised with people that were called curanderas and curanderos. So there was an idea in my head of what that meant. And I really thought it was super Mexican. I was like, yeah, it's super Mexican. And then the more I researched, I realized like, oh, okay. It's actually just the essence of the word, but the word is correct. So for
Mhm.
me, I'm very clear when I tell people I do modern curanderismo. I don't do traditional. I don't. There's certain traits about traditional curanderismo that I don't agree and I don't accept. So for me, it's more about modern curanderismo, which is, the what I call the botanical and a mixture of botanical and ancestral healing modality of Mexico. That's kind of
Mhm.
like the way that I explain it. And Latine herbalism, it's part of that. It's influenced by curanderismo.
Mhm. Okay, thank you. So, in your book, you mentioned that many of today's ailments are tied to the pressure of modern
Yeah.
life. What are some of the most common, maybe nervous system imbalances or ailments that you see, and how does curanderismo support that healing for those people?
So one of the beautiful things about curanderismo, when we really look at it, is what we call the plática or the heart talk. And there's this fantastic book that I love that talks about curanderismo being actually the original form of psychotherapy. And I was like, wow, I
Mm.
love that. I think that's amazing. Yeah. And so one of the things that a lot of the curanderos that I don't want to say I follow because that's the wrong word,
Mhm.
or that maybe I'm influenced by a little bit. They put a lot of weight on what the plática is, because the plática is really not only where you get to understand the other person, right, what's happening really to them, but you also start to get an idea of how they think, right, by how they speak. And so, at least from the curanderismo part, the plática, which is what we, a lot of people translate as the heart talk, that's where you start to understand the person's um, mental health, right? And which is very, very much tied into the nervous system health and the digestive health and everything else that's there. And so I think some of the stuff that we deal with in modern life is very much a dysregulation of the nervous system, which obviously leads to mental health issues. And so, a lot of the things that I talk about in the book in the moon section, which is about the nervous system, that's really those are the rituals that I think are the most important, um, at least from that space, from the space of saying, the stress that we deal with, because that's really what it comes down to. That's the word that we all use. It's stress, stress, stress. I'm so stressed out. And that to me, stress to me equals nervous system dysregulator, and that shows with the mental health, and that leads to, depression, believe it or not, migraines. It leads to having the idea that everything that validates you come from the outside instead of, your own personal beliefs and values. And so all of that is something that I think, yeah, those are the types of dysregulators and quote
Mhm.
unquote disease that we can see, right? And then, there's a big part of the tradition of curanderismo with rituals. And rituals, they're pretty much tied to that essence of not, rituals are different than herbs, right? Herbs are put in the body to heal with physical traits. Yes, the physical can affect the invisible part of our bodies, right? Which is like the aura. People like to call auras or chakras. I think that's where people can really understand that. But when you do rituals, you're actually affecting the unseen part of us, which is that, and when you do that, you start to understand that that also affects your mental state. That also affects your body. And so a lot of the rituals in curanderismo are meant for that. They're meant to calm the body. They're meant to calm the physical body. They're meant to calm the mental body, or the mental state, if you want to call that as well. And so, again, everything in the section for moon section is about
Mhm.
that. And it's about relieving all the stress, which ultimately leads to this harmony.
Ooh, I love that. I can't wait to read the whole thing because I've only like skimmed through like the sections in the chapters to kind of get an
Yeah,
idea to prepare, but now I'm like, wow, can't wait to dive in. Uh,
wonderful.
so okay, so we talked about like the moon section, the moon energy a little bit. Can you talk about what the sun energy is? What does that relate to?
So the sun energy relates to like the sun, right? It's transformative, it fires up, right? And so it relates to the digestive system, and for us, the digestive system is where we transform. That's where we transform food into the actual power that we manage our life with, right? In Ayurveda, they talk about Ayurveda is the traditional healing system of India. And they talk about Agni, which is fire, which is a fire in the belly. And that's what they refer to as well. They refer to this physical, energetic fire in the body that transform food into prana, into life, right? And so for me, the sun section is about that. It's a place where you can find rituals and remedies to actually activate your digestive system, and I think a lot of us who suffer from digestive issues understand that if your digestion is not rolling and flowing, then you're just uncomfortable in your body. And no matter what you do, you're just uncomfortable with everything else that you do. So the digestive system is usually where we begin. And as herbalists, that's actually where we begin. We ask people, what are you eating? How are you eating it? Are you going to the toilet every day? How are you going to the toilet? Like, we get into all of that because that tells us a lot about the way your body's processing and physically what you're made of too. What you are, what you eat. And so that's usually where we start. And so the sun section, which is the first major chapter, because we have the little chapters in front of that, but the sun chapter is the chapter where we start with the digestive system, and then from there we go to the nervous system with the moon section.
The nervous section is the moon section. Is that what you just said?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, okay. Ooh, I love that. Very cool. I'm going to go back to something you said because I don't want to miss it.
Yeah.
You said something about when you were talking about las pláticas. Did you say there's a book called La Plática or?
I'm going to give you the name of the book. No, the book is about, hold on, I got to find it. The book is about seeing curanderismo as the first form of psychotherapy.
Yes, that. Okay. I will make sure to link that in the show notes for people who are interested in that.
It's an excellent book. And now I got to find the name. I'm looking at my book, by the way. It's in there.
No problem. No problem. Oh, it's in your book?
Yeah, it's in the references. So it's called Curandero, Hispanic Ethno Psychotherapy and Curanderismo. And it says treating Hispanic mental health in the 21st century. This is from Antonio Noe Zavaleta.
Perfect.
It's excellent book. Yeah, and he has a lot of different examples, but he's a proponent of, this is like before we even had Freud, like this is what we do, and he refers to it also from the shamanic perspective, which is a little bit different than curanderismo, where there is a little bit more of a relationship between the healer and the person being healed, and that conversation that happens. So yeah.
Oof, I love this. Okay, more books to add to the shelf.
There's always more. Yes.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Let's see. So curanderismo, from what I've gathered, often includes ceremony and connection with the elements. What role does ritual play in healing, especially for those who've grown up disconnected from their roots?
Yeah, that's a great question. So ritual impacts what we call the there's so many different ways to call it, and I'm trying to find the right word so I don't lose people, right? But like when we talk about physical body, right? We have a physical body, and then a lot of us, if we believe in something else and something extra in the world, then we also have an invisible body, right? A lot of people like to call it the aura or the subtle body, and so ritual is sort of like the bridge between the two, right? Ritual can bridge your physical body and your subtle body. And so it does that with, the influence of the elementals, right? And so when we're talking about that, we're talking about bringing together all these elements that we are made up of. One of the first chapters of the book talks about the energetics of herbs, because that's sort of like where all this idea comes from. Our ancestors, when they lived outdoors in the elements, they had a very keen sense of, oh wow, the water element is in us, the fire element is in us, the earth element is in us, right? The air element is in us. So the rituals are the part and the bridge that brings together the subtle body with the physical body, right? And the reason they do that is because usually rituals bring together all the different elements, right? And all the different elements are sort of like what we're made of, the same way that everything in nature is made of. So, rituals usually when they come from a an elder or they come from, tradition, these rituals have been done for many, many, many centuries. And a lot of the time, they were created by people who understood that we are all made of elements, that the herbs are made of the elements, and the elements themselves contain also the elements, right? And so that's what happens. We're moving into our elemental energies. And sometimes they're very physical elements, right, in our body. And then there is the essence of the elements in our subtle body as well. For example, when somebody talks about, astrology and they're like, oh, you're a fire element. Well, you understand that you're not physically fire, but there is an essence of that element in you. And it's the same thing with our subtle body, right? The body that we don't see, but we can feel, right? And when we put our hands together, sort of like a little bit apart and try to make a little ball, if you're really intentional and you're working with other people, you can start to feel like, oh, wow, there's like a density in between my hands. What is that? That's your subtle body. That is
Mm-hmm.
the part of you that is unseen, but it can be felt, and in what we call today science, it's what people call the electromagnetic field, right? We talk about the electromagnetic field that every person has, and it can be measured, in science. And within scientific experiments, we can have a measurement for everybody, not just people, but also animals and things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you think about it, it's kind of like the Wi-Fi. Why we know Wi-Fi exists because we can hook up, we can see each other, we can listen, but you don't see it. It's the same thing for us. That's like our own personal Wi-Fi code. And so ritual is that bridge between that unseen part of us and the physical part of us, and also because the person that does the ritual, right? The curandero or the curandera, the person that does the ritual, they have a sense of um, experience in that world of the subtlety. They can also go there with us, which is why they
Mm-hmm.
can be very powerful depending on the healer that you go to, right? And so that's where what ritual really plays for us, and something really interesting and beautiful. I come from a yoga lineage of Krishnamacharya, and Krishnamacharya is considered to be the grandfather of modern yoga. And when he was 101, one of his students asked him, like, what's the most important part of yoga? Like, tell us. And he's like, devotion is the most important part of yoga. And they were like, devotion? Like they expected to hear something about sit on your head, breathe, this crazy breath work. And instead they were like, devotion. He's like, yeah, your ritual is the most important part of your practice. And even
Mm-hmm.
in that tradition, even from this man who was a master, it was very clear, like, oh, ritual is the key, for a lot of what you do. And if you really think about it, we live in ritualized life to some
Mm-hmm.
degree. You wake up, you have your coffee, you go to work. I mean, it's a ritual. The whole entire day is a ritual, and
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, at least from the perspective of curanderismo, the ritual is the bridge, but rituals are everywhere. And so it's a matter of us like identifying like, oh, that's a ritual that I want, and that's a ritual that I actually don't want.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because it could be a choice that way. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you talk about rituals and you talked about them in the sense of like, oh, we're in a ritual all day, right? Like we have our
Mm-hmm.
morning ritual, our nighttime ritual, our all day ritual.
Yeah.
But then you also refer to the rituals that of the healers that you're working with.
Mm-hmm.
So these rituals, which I assume are more for like healing purposes, when you work with somebody, is that something that is strictly done with the guidance of somebody, or is that something, these type of rituals, things that we can do for ourselves, and does your book touch on that?
Yes. So all the rituals that I describe in the book are rituals you can do just for yourself. But there are others that are meant to be done with other people. So for
Mhm.
example, there's a ritual of the altar, which is, a way of bridging family and friends, because what it really is about is a ritual that we do for grieving, and in Mexico when we have Day of the Dead, we just call the entire thing, the entire ofrenda, we call an altar, and the whole altar we call an ofrenda. So it's, an altar and an offering are the same thing, right? But the idea is that you go to that offering, you go to that altar to relieve your grief. And so I give like a very sort of uncomplex version of that as one of the rituals. And that's the one ritual that I think is for everybody to share with other people, right? But everything else, I think, is a ritual that you can do for yourself. And I advocate always doing stuff for yourself first. instead of, and sharing it for yourself, with yourself first before you share that with others. Because we have very good intentions to want to help other people, but we don't really know how other people are going to react. You can say, "Oh, I got this book and this seems good for you. Try it." And then they come back and they go, "Wow, that's the worst experience I've ever had in my life." Like, you don't know until you do it for yourself, right? And so I advocate for rituals in the book that are done for yourself first, as self-care, and then do them a few times and then see, like, really, what is it doing for you? What energy is it nurturing in you? And then from there you can share with other people, and even maybe then you can help with the setup, and just be supportive in the integration of it. But definitely, rituals they can be really beautiful with the right practitioner, right, as well. You just have to find the right practitioner. and that
Mhm.
is and that is unfortunately something that at least, in my practice now, my one-on-one practices, um I hear a lot of different stories, not all of them very good, which,
Right.
you know my share for others is follow that intuition. Because every time somebody comes to me and says, "Oh, but I really wasn't sure," follow that.
Mhm.
If you're not 1,000% yes, this is the person that I really want to do this ritual with,
Yes.
it's a
Yes.
it's a it's a soft no. That's a no. That's a no,
Mhm.
no, no. So
Mhm.
definitely, when you're reaching out to other people and you want to find others, do a little bit of research, take your time, um, and yeah, and have a 1,000% yes before you say, "Let's do this." Hmm.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that in. Couple of weeks ago, I had somebody else on the podcast, and she does psychedelic journey integration,
Hmm.
and she said the exact same thing. She's like, if
Yeah.
listen to how your body's
Yeah.
responding. If it's not
Yeah.
100%, then run.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you for like bringing that home again, because I think it's very important. Um, all right. So there's this rising interest in decolonizing wellness and
Hmm.
reclaiming ancestral knowledge. How do you hold that intention in your work while also making your book accessible to the modern audience and to like modern herbalism, like you're calling it?
Yeah. So one of the things that happened when I started writing the book is the editor was like, remember, it's a beginner's guide book. It's a beginner's guidebook. I'm like, right. I forget, because I've been doing this for so long that sometimes you want to offer people these like really transformative experiences. And so I had to go back to like sort of like the basics. And one of the things that came out of that when I was sharing with somebody, they were like, "Well, my grandmother used to make that," kind of like very dismissive. And it's like, "Yeah, your grandmother used to make it, but do you make it for yourself?" They're like, "No." And there was this thing of like, well, how important can it be if grandma used to make it? And so the way that I hold space is I tell people, and actually yesterday I was doing something with somebody and I said, ask your family members what grandma used to make, what grandma used to eat, how grandma used. That's how you hold that space. That's how you decolonize. Because otherwise, if you keep telling me that grandmother's, recipes and remedios are like arbitrary, then you're not actually going back to your true ancestral line. You're saying, it's not important. Grandma used to, if anything, it used to be that the mother of every household had to learn how to do everything because we lived in remote areas where there wasn't quote unquote allopathic medicine. So what grandmother and great grandmother used to do are our ancestral lines. So that's how you decolonize. Go back to that. Yes, get a book and be amazed about all the awesome, amazing things you can do. But if your reaction to something as simple as a chamomile tea is like, "Well, grandma used to make that," then you're part of the problem. You're not
Mhm.
helping us to understand, like, oh wow, what grandma used to do is actually important. There was wisdom there, there, as there should be, because it's grandma.
Mhm.
And so I think that's the way that I sort of like hold that space to remind people, what grandma and grandpa used to do were very good. Also, what great grandma and great grandpa, which some of us don't really know a lot about, that is important as well. And ask the aunties, ask the cousins, ask the mom, as the third removed aunts that you see once a year. Ask them, because they all have and hold these stories from our ancestors that we kind of put aside. And
Mhm.
so that's how I remind people to, like, actually, that's how you hold space.
Yeah.
And it's in the part of decolonize, like truly decolonize it. It's very hard. I'm 1,000% mestiza. I have, my father had French, African, Spaniard. I mean, my mother is indigenous. Like, you, I can't decolonize. It's very difficult because everything is blended, and I love everything about it. I can't say I don't like my curly hair. I love my curly hair, but does that make me non-Mexican? Absolutely not. And so the part of decolonizing, I feel like there is levels of that. And some people can go level 1000 and say, you know what, I want to say no to everything that's gringo, and that's fine. But the rest of us who are mestizos, we're sort of like, we can only do like 1%. And then we kind of have to be like, we got to integrate. Like, we got to integrate all of this
Mhm.
and give respect to all of it more than
Mhm.
anything. And so those are my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, that's really important. It is hard to decolonize
Yeah.
100%. I definitely, uh, very conscious of it and try to do my best in my business to
Mm,
operate differently from what we've been taught.
yeah.
Even in running my business and, let alone corporate, that's a whole other issue. But, just
Hmm.
like in running my business and, my team members and, all the things, right? Scheduling and paying and all that. I'm trying to do that very, very differently. But you make a really, really great point that it's hard to decolonize when the reality is like I'm really pale. I have a lot of European influence. It's just the reality. So how do I
Yeah.
fully decolonize everything when that truly is part of my background?
Hmm.
I was taking some during the pandemic, I was taking some cooking lessons online with one of my favorite Mexican chefs. It was Mexican cooking, and in one of the techniques that we were doing, one of the dishes she was teaching us to do, she was like, "Oh, this is how you make this kind of." It was kind of like a souffle. It was like a pastel or like a torta de maíz or something like that,
Hmm.
kind of like a cornbread almost, but it was like a souffle.
Yeah.
So she had us using this technique. And she said, "Oh, this is a French technique, and this is how we do this." And this, and I'm like, "Whoa, hold on. This is a French technique in Mexican cooking." And
Yeah.
that's when it like hit me like, wait a minute, we can't, like, how do we fully decolonize? Like, this is part of our lineage. This is something that's been passed down for generations in our lineage, yet it utilizes a French technique. So
Right.
it's hard to fully do away with all of that. So yeah, thank you.
It's very hard. And what I'm finding more than anything, I'm finding more people who have gone the extreme, who
Mhm.
who who all of a sudden it's like, we don't like these people and we don't like those people and those people are press. And it's like, the more that we do the division, the harder it is to have compassion, and the compassion for me is key. I think that's the part where, if you have the compassion, I'm not saying you say you give everybody a pass for all the shit they've done, like, excuse my language, but you don't do that. But compassion allows you to be in a place of acceptance. Otherwise, it's a constant state of, them and us. And that doesn't work
Right,
either. That doesn't
right.
work either.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. The more we do it, the more we're buying into what they wanted us to do, right? To
Yeah.
like you completely
Yeah.
separate us to
Yeah.
begin with. So yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely this whole like gray
Yeah.
area.
I also don't think
Um,
there's anything wrong with integrating things that make sense. For example, curanderismo is not just Mexican. Curanderismo is it's a beautiful way of seeing Egyptian, Turkish, African, all in one, like, with whatever our ancestors also added to that. Also Spaniard techniques, or quote unquote Eastern Western techniques. So like you
mhm,
can't say curanderismo without all that. Like, it just, then it will be called something else. It will be called
mhm,
something else. And so, that was the part where I had to personally accept, like, oh wow, this is not like 1000% Mexican. This is like, it's Mexican, and it's also all these other little dashes of spice that are in there. And so, you know, and a lot of us, I think a lot of us today are feeling that, especially the Mexicans that don't live in Mexico, because again, that's a different culture and it has a whole different weight. For the rest of us who are out here, it's something that we're learning. And for me, I'm an Afro Mexican American. It's like, oh, In Mexico, my curly hair is like everybody just has a big deal. And it's like, well, it's not a big deal when I come here. And so that's something that I also from a very early age learned to sort of integrate in myself. Like, oh, I'm Mexican and I have curly hair, and that's okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Love that. Well, when my last question, I believe it was yes, that I prepared here. I think we might have already touched on it, but I'm gonna ask you anyways, in case you have something different. For someone who's listening, who feels like, they feels called to reconnect with their ancestral healing,
Mhm.
but doesn't know where to start. What would you tell them? And I think that part of that, what you said about like asking about the
Mhm.
abuelitas and the great grandmothers, what
Mhm.
they ate and the remedios and all those things. I think that's for me, I feel like that's part of it. But would you add, is there something else you would add to that?
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, so start within your own family circle, right? And be open to whatever it is that they're going to tell you. And then the other thing is if you see somebody, and I'm talking from experience because it's happened to me in both directions where I've asked and I've been asked, if you see somebody on the street and they're just beaming, go up to them. Not not like weird and like,
Not
creepy, but
creepy.
sort of more like, hey, you're glowing. What's your secret? And
Oh, I
let it
love
be.
that.
And let it be. People have asked me, like, in the subways in New York City, people would ask me, like, you are glowing. What are you doing? And, is it your skincare? Is it, like I would have all these questions. And it didn't happen every time, but at least I can count 3 times that something like that would happen. And I would say, oh, meditation. And I would give them this, spiel about how meditation changed my life. Or if I was doing a dieta or some kind of like herbalist protocol, I would say, well, I'm trying this now. You should try it, and so do that, stay open. Stay open to the visuals of that. When you see, somebody that looks like they're having a wonderful time and that life is good, they're reflecting something beautiful that they're going through, that they're trying, that they're doing. And, I am sure that they will be happy to share. So, yeah. So I would say you can do that too.
Mhm. I love that. Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Josie. How do you work with people? How can people work with you? Where do they find you? Let's start there.
Oh, beautiful. So I currently live in Miami. So if there's any listeners out there who are living in Miami, I have my own space where I do healing work, and they can find me at curanderaremedies.com. They can
Mm-hmm.
also find me through Latine with an E, Latine with an E, herbalism.com as well. That redirects you to curandera remedies. And I also do travel quite extensively. So I do a West Coast tour, I do a New York City tour. I go back to my old stomping grounds. And I'm always open to offering sessions if anybody feels like that's something they want to do. I offer a variety of different workshops, both in person and online as
Mm-hmm.
well. And everything is under my Curandera Remedies
Mm-hmm.
umbrella. So they can always go and find me there. And it's the same
Okay.
across all platforms because I started using the same before it became, a household name. So you'll find that for Facebook, for Instagram, for everything.
Oh, I love that. Very cool. I will link everything in the show notes for sure, including the book. And
Beautiful.
when
Thank you.
when are you going to be on tour on the West Coast, in California specifically?
Yeah, so I'm going to go to a gathering called Spirit Weavers. I'm going to be there from June 11th to June. Oh, my calendar is no longer there. Till June 20 something. And then I'm going to be in LA after that. So probably the last, yeah, between June 26th and June 30th, I'm going to be in LA. Probably a little earlier, but during that time.
Ooh, okay. I'm gonna look up what you're
Yeah.
doing in those days, because that would
Oh
be
yeah, I
amazing
would love to see
to meet
you.
you in person. Oh, that would be so awesome. I'll take a
Yeah,
look at what you've got going on. So yeah, maybe
beautiful.
we'll
Thank
meet.
you. Yeah, it'd be
Well,
lovely
thank
to.
you.
Yeah, it'd be lovely.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. It's not lost on me that you take time out of your schedule to be here and to share all your beautiful wisdom and your creation and everything that you're doing for our world and our community. So I appreciate you and your
You.
time. And anytime you want to come back, let me know.
Oh, I love it. Thank you, Sonia. It was such a pleasure. And thank you for everything you're doing as well, supporting and empowering women out there. We need more of that, especially for the Latin community. I feel like
Yes.
that's the part that we need to like really build like true community. So thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I sure did. And one of the things that we discussed was this idea of asking your family about the things and the rituals and the foods and the remedies that your grandmother and your great grandmother, your grandparents used when they were growing up. That is where we start to connect with our own lineage and our ancestry and those healing practices that are part of our lineage. So as homework, I want you to do that. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna reach out to my mom, and I'm gonna reach out to my aunt on my dad's side of the family to really start learning what those are and actually writing them down and leaving those for those after me who might be interested in knowing their ancestry and their lineage and what that was all about. So that's your homework. So let me know over on Instagram at Modern Latina and Midlife what you found, what if you did the homework, or email me at sonia@sonia-flores.com. I'd love to hear what that was for you and if you found any surprises or what that experience was like for you. I think that would be fun. But I've linked everything in the show notes, the book, her book, the other book that she talked about, that she mentioned, Curandero, by Antonio Noe, I believe was the name. I'll link that all in the show notes. And where you can get a hold of Josie as well. And, one of the other things that we talked about was being able to embrace that thing that you love, the thing that you want to do, the thing that you want to create that's going to be soulful. It's going to be unique to you. And one of the things that I do is I work with women to do exactly that. I have a program called Launch Your Soul Based Business. It's a 90-day program to build a heart-centered business aligned with your purpose. This is not just another course to teach you how to start your own business. This is a live coaching program. It's a 90-day coaching program. And there are teachings that teach you how to do the things. And we do have live calls once a week as well, so that I can help you create it. I can answer the questions. I can coach you through all the things that you need to do. But what it makes this program really special is that we are calling in the divine feminine to create what that business is for you. We're tapping into the heart. We're tapping into your intuition. We're calling in your highest self and your spirit guides to help you make that plan, to make sure that you're doing something that is truly aligned with what your soul is here to do and what you're passionate about, and not just picking basically another career, that you're going to be a slave to, but doing something that truly speaks to what your soul is here to do. So if this is something that you're interested in, I would love to talk to you about that. The program is not going to start until, or the next cohort's not going to start until August. But if you'd love to get on the wait list, go over to sonia-flores.com/soulbiz. And I will actually it's soniaflores.com/soulbusiness and sign up for the wait list. And you will be the first to know when that comes up. You are also more than welcome to email me or DM me on Instagram so we can talk about what that looks like and if this is the right fit for you. And again, the doors for that won't open until probably July, and the program will start in August. But I thought it was a really great time to mention that, since we just had this really wonderful conversation about the same topic. So thank you so much for being here. If this was interesting to you, forward it to a friend. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed it. Hasta la próxima.